Right now, stress isn't personal, it's cultural. In the past few weeks alone, we've watched political tensions escalate, economic anxieties rise, and uncertainty ripple through every part of our daily life, from our inboxes to our homes. It's no wonder so many of us are feeling off, like distracted, restless, emotional reactive, or just plain tired. But here's the truth: you can't wait for the world to calm down in order to feel steady. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to stay grounded when everything around you feels like it's shifting. Not by checking out or numbing or ignoring what's happening, but by learning how to respond from a place of clarity, intention, and calm strength. We'll walk you through 3 science backed practices that help you reconnect with your values, regulate your nervous system, and act like the version of the self you want to be, even when the pressure is real and palpable. Because when the ground feels shaky, it's the internal footing that matters most. So let's get into it. Dr. Teplow, what do you do when the ground feels all shaky around you?
I love that term. That's a really, yeah. Well, coming from Northern California as a native, I can tell you,
Definitely.
been there, done that. Do you hide under your desk? Do you stand in the doorway? Yeah. What's most important is to remind yourself who you are, what you value, what you stand for. I think that if you look at accounts of survivors of really, really hard stuff, POWs, Holocaust survivors, other people who've had zero control over situation and made it through. It's about what they really, really cared about, what they and the trend, the things that transcend time and place.
Like,
Um,
for example, well, like, what do you mean? Like, give me an example.
oh, people you love. Even if you're, there's an account of a POW from who was POW in Vietnam, and he said just thinking about his family, the kind of conversations he'd have with them, that kept him going. He said he had to survive so that he could see his kids again, hug his wife. So that's one thing. The other thing, I think, is that when we're caught up in, in stress, either just mild, going down the road and someone cuts in front of you, or more catastrophic, we have this sense of we have to respond now, and that's not necessarily so, unless you're being swept away with water and you need, by the water, you need to grab something, there's a kind of false sense of urgency. So think of that, pausing and saying, what really matters now? Who do I want to be seen as? Who do I want to see myself as? Is it somebody who's calm, who is patient, who is kind, and taking that step back instead of what am I going to do to react now, but who do I want to be? What values do I want to embody? How do I want to be seen? Can be very grounding because it puts you back in touch with, whoa, this really counts. I want to be generous. I want to be kind. I want to be patient, be loving. I want to be, incisive. Now is not the time to act. Now is the time to breathe.
Yeah. No, I think what is important with every one of these items, and obviously this reaction is and how we want to be intentional about it, begins with just noticing that we are stressed, or we're feeling, not we are stressed, we're feeling stressed. I want to make sure I'm distancing myself appropriately. That we are feeling stress or we're feeling anxiety, and just by noticing that, even labeling it, saying, "Hey, I'm noticing I'm feeling stress or anxiety or whatever emotion that you're." Fleeting emotion that you're feeling, just noticing that, and then being able to go into the questions that you were just asking about, how do you want to show up in this moment? So it always comes back with all of our clients is to start with the noticing.
Yeah, and you make me think of 2 points. I hope I can remember them. One is that you are not your feelings. You're not in control of your feelings. Feelings just come and go and come and go. Anybody who has tight shoulders and thinks, why are my shoulders tight? Oh, because I'm stressed out. The taxes are due in a week or whatever. And you're not in control of your feelings. You're in control of what you do about your feelings. And one mistake people make is to identify as their feelings. I am hungry, or I am tired, I am stressed, rather than what you said. I notice that I'm feeling hungry. I notice that I'm getting stressed. Just using language to create a little distance between what you're experiencing at the moment that's painful or uncomfortable and who you really are is important. So one is, and that's called externalizing. So
Mhm.
create that distance. And the other thing is to just be an observer and to notice without getting caught up in, I have to do something. So it's like, I notice that my shoulders are tight, or I notice my stomach's in knot, rather than avoiding it. And that's what happens. That's the second point I want to make, is so often we think that when we're in a state of, some discomfort or unpleasantness or difficulty, the first thing we want to do is get the heck out of there and escape or avoid. And we will engage in avoidance behaviors. That's okay sometimes, but most of the time it's not. And it runs us into problems. So your point about just first noticing is so important, and being open to noticing and knowing that just because you notice the discomfort or unpleasantness doesn't mean that that's who you are. That's how it'll be forever. It's a step in the right direction. And then you could.
Now, you mentioned something that was really interesting, but I wanted to mention, but then you can do what? I mean, that's.
And then you can pause and say, now what do I want to do based on my values?
Yeah, or who you want to show up in, or another way to say is how you want to show up in the world.
The world, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing that was interesting, you said about, I noticed some stress, or I noticed I'm getting stressed. That's even a more powerful one. Is I notice I'm heading in that direction, because you have a lot of opportunity to react in that case. Or even just saying, I notice I'm getting stressed versus I'm stressed. That also gives you some more runway. I notice I'm getting stressed. And that's interesting. That word, that's interesting, is so powerful, because again, you are able to distance yourself, and you're leading with curiosity. I'm like, oh, that's interesting that I'm getting stressed. What am I noticing about that? What am I noticing about myself? What am I noticing about how I want to, again, show up in the world? That's interesting statement. Just even externalizes it even more, and allows you to be an investigator, or your own detective, to see and be intentional about how you want to respond.
Yeah, indeed. And one thing I think is important to note about those feelings is that often they have nothing to do with present time. Every one of us has that little wounded child that wasn't understood the way we needed to be understood, or wasn't heard the way we needed to be heard. And so that's what triggers that, fight, flight, freeze, all those adaptive defense responses or defense mechanisms. And I think that that's really important to keep in the back of the mind, is that sometimes things are just fine in present day, and something will trigger that a feeling of discomfort or pain or whatever. But it's not in the present time. It's something from, past that wounded child. And it's very important then to stay curious and say, oh, yeah, I noticed that coming up. And either what's it about, or what do I want to do? And I think directing the mind at what you want to do helps also relieve some of that, because you're giving your brain a point to a direction to go in.
And that's always key, to give yourself a direction to go in when you're noticing something that you don't, that is not a direction you want to go in. So it doesn't matter the why it's there. It's just, what do you want instead? What do you want instead?
Absolutely. And that's really important, to keep asking, what do I want instead? And the one thing I was going to mention is when we were talking earlier, is often when something happens, especially I think in interpersonal relationships that can be stressful, we get caught up in the urgency to do something, and we might, what's the expression, win the battle but lose the war. And I think it's very easy to see the difference between how you react at the moment and what you ultimately want and value. So if you're in a relationship and you want a loving relationship and there's some kind of conflict, you have a choice. You scream at the person and say, see, I was right. You've won the battle. But have you done anything to nurture that relationship, so that the war, so to speak, so you preserve what you do want? And I think when we take pause to say, this is a really hard situation, what outcome do I want? Versus, just
How do I react?
Yeah, how do I react? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You brought up something else. Go ahead.
No.
When we talked at the very beginning, you were talking about the extreme case of being in a war zone or and having zero control. And that zero control stood out with me because then obviously in those extreme situations, they do have almost zero control. They don't have 100%. I mean, they do have some control over the reactions, as we were saying, which is very powerful. But in our modern world, obviously, I was just saying this, the turmoil that's happening in the culture, they don't, doesn't have total control over you. You have control over certain things in your life. And that's a key tool. That's one of the key tools to be able to reduce your stress or manage the stress, is to identify what do you do have control over.
Yeah. And that's easy. Anything you have control over. Um, how many times you do this when you brush your teeth, or what coffee cup you grab at the moment. And also making social connections. You have control over how you interact with people. Do you smile at every opportunity you can get? Um, and yeah, that's about it.
So, what else would you recommend for people that are feeling overwhelmed with stress right now? And one of our other scientific approaches that we use in our programs that we with our clients, and we have our upcoming stress management quest, which these are exact tools from that. And so I wanted to be able to give an opportunity to talk about those other ones that we have.
Yeah. Well, one is to look at your own history of success and go from the history of success. You just call it past, present, and future. So what have you done in the past that's worked for you to manage whatever stressors? And again, your brain doesn't know super stress from little stress. It just knows stress. So don't discount what you've done to manage small stressors. If somebody's cut you off in traffic, and usually you curse, but sometime you didn't. What were you doing then? How did you manage it? And that what you did then can be expanded to bigger stressors. You thought to yourself, wait a second, do I want to be a jerk, or do I want to, be, take a higher road?
Mhm.
And you remind yourself, no, I'm the kind of person who takes the higher road. And that can apply to bigger stressors. But so it's, what have you done in the past that's helped you cope? Oh, I took a walk in nature, or I took a moment to smell the coffee, smell the roses, or smell the coffee grounds, whatever it is. So that's past. And just thinking about even the smallest times, make a list of it and appreciate what you've been able to do. Ask yourself the two questions. We've talked about this in the past. What questions? What was I doing? And how was I doing it? Because when you know that, then you can replicate it, amplify it. So that's the past.
So
Present.
what you were doing? Like I was taking a breath before I responded, and that's the how I was doing it.
Yeah. What did I do? I did some deep breathing. How did you do it?
Oh,
Well,
I set up
I
small.
breathed through my nostrils. I counted to 4. I held the breath, whatever it was.
So that
Really
was
get down into the nitty gritty, because when you are remembering, the way you remember is in essence to relive it. And so when you're talking about, well, how did I do it in the past? And you're thinking, what did I do and how did I do it? You're replicating that experience in your nervous system. So
Hmm.
you're already calming yourself down. I got so pissed. I'm so pissed off at that person for what they did. Wait, when in the past have I somehow managed that stress with that particular person better in the past? What did I do? Well, I took a breath. How did I do it? I breathed in. And as you're doing it, you'll notice yourself doing very subtle little physical changes.
I think that's always so interesting. The brain doesn't know the past, present, or the future. So when you do visualize the past of what you did that was successful, it calms you at the moment. Or if you visualize in the future, it does the same, and it already presets you up for doing it in the future.
Exactly. And that's one reason I think, and we can talk about this another time, but that's one reason why you don't have to go down the rabbit hole of root cause analysis or problems, etc., because it really doesn't feel good, and it replicates and just reinforces that the troubled nervous system, so to speak.
Yeah, no, and let's say a little bit though, because when you're stressed out, something happened. Sometimes you just want to vent and get it off your chest, and it does feel. Because this came up with some clients in our program this last week, and so I wanted to bring it up because it's so interesting about how they realize that, oh yeah, I do feel good in the moment, but what afterwards I feel just as bad or even worse because they just relived, and then their nervous system relived that negative experience, and they came out with, well, I'm still in this same spot without a what do I want instead, or visualizing what that would be, and how much better they feel when we talk about the past successes, when they were successful, not the challenge that they just had, but when they were successful, or what did they want instead of visualizing that.
Yeah, and not only does going down that rabbit hole get exacerbated, but telling about the, all the problem story, but especially when the listener then says, "How did that? What how bad was it? And how long did that last? And how did it start?"
That
And then
exacerbates it.
it's
Yeah.
off to the races with that. And it's not that we don't talk about problems. We don't shy away from problems at all, but we look at them from a perspective of coping and managing. And things sounded terrible. It's like, wow, that sounds really, really hard. And also, I was going to thinking, when someone is ventilating, what do you do? First of all, is don't fuel the trouble, express empathy. Oh, that sounds so hard. Wow. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. That's empathy. People will feel hurt, and then don't go down, don't continue down. And so, how did that happen? Tell me again. How long?
Yeah.
Yeah, go. And so how did you even manage to get through it at all? I mean, you're here today. What did you do? What helped you? Um, what kinds of things did you say to yourself to help you get through it? Who helped you? I mean, there's so many questions you can ask, but it's not to ignore the problem, but it's to see the capacity of the person to make it through. Same with you. If you're not, if you're not trapped in your bed with your pillow over your head, you're doing something to cope with
Yeah,
stress.
that brings up one other area that we want to talk about in this program about how to manage stress in this world where everything's shaking below you and you feel like you have no ability to respond, is the other people in your life, how they can help you. And we were just giving some of that coaching there about how to help someone else, but again, just how do you use other people in your life to be able to manage this unknown.
Yeah. Well, one thing is take every opportunity you can just to make pleasant, I was going to say meaningful social connections. We go to a fruit and vegetable store where everybody speaks Spanish. So I used to have good Spanish. Now it's really rotten. It doesn't matter. I still make the effort and make the connection. It tells people that I care about them, that I respect their language, and I'm trying to make a meaningful connection. And it's remarkable, even just smile. It's
Yeah, I would
remarkable
say just
how,
a smile, because if you feel so nervous about like if you're in the
oh,
elevator with somebody and you don't want, I don't want to do talk. A smile, looking in the eye and a smile is enough to reduce your stress and the other person's as well. It's kind of a gift.
yeah, absolutely. And it has there's an enduring value or, effect on that.
How is it enduring? How is connecting with someone with a smile or saying hello enduring for you or the other person?
Well, it's shifted in your nervous system for one. And I think that it also reinforces that you count. If you smile and somebody smiles back at you, it says you have some power. You do have some control. What it reminds me of research that's been done and replicated a lot of times about boys and girls in school. Girls, sit pretty and nice, and as long as they're quiet, teacher you know, doesn't mess with them. Boys get into mischief and they get into trouble. And interestingly, the boys perceive that they have more power because somebody is noticing them,
Huh.
even if it's negative, like, you're always interrupting, blah, blah, blah. But they're being noticed, they're being acknowledged, and they have impact on somebody. So going back, that's kind of far afield, but going back is to have that co-regulation. You smile, person smiles back. You have that mutual understanding. It doesn't take a lot to feel like you count and that you're recognized. And I think that, in times of really great stress, we think, who are we and what are we?
Yeah, I think back to and talking about other times when going back to the playbook of when other times we were in a time like this where everything felt shaky, what did you do in those times? So I think back to this 2008, we had a stock market, or 2020 when we had COVID, or even further back on to 9/11. For those of us who are old enough to live 9/11, the being, and that's what made COVID so hard, because we couldn't get that connection, because everyone strove for that. That's why we got on these on Zoom, was to try to make that co-regulation connection. And definitely after 9/11, I remember just people just being able to go out to their neighbors and talking to them, and how much that was. It wasn't even a strategy or a tactic. It was just the human drive that created it.
Yeah, I like that human drive. It reminds me during, I did mention we started out with shaky ground. I
Yeah.
was in Northern California in the earthquake of 1989. And when the Bay Bridge collapsed, it was, a lot of people lost their lives, lost everything. And I was in a community, and I thought, well, what about the older people who don't have anybody? So I got a phone list and started calling people and said, hey, I'm just checking on you. How are you doing? And people were in tears because they never expected someone to call them, to care about them, and they didn't need to have anything done for them. So sometimes we think, oh, I can't do that because I don't have time, blah blah blah, but it's just reaching out and to know that you've impacted somebody so deeply and so meaningfully. And that's a lot of years ago, and I still remember that sense of connection.
So go out and smile at someone today. It'll help your nervous system to calm, and it will have residual effects for you for time after that, and the other person as well.
And it occurs to me, yeah, go out and be in nature. And I
Yes.
think also one thing that's great about spring is that everything's blossoming, at least depending on where you are. But, I think nature is really healing and reaffirming because it's always changing. So plants die in the winter, but they come back up. And that, I think, consciously or unconsciously, can remind us there is hope. Things do come back. They may come back differently, but a tree doesn't become a cat. It holds its value and its identity. And that also is a reminder to us about who we are, what we stand for, and that we can, weather those storms. Conditions can change, but we are who we are. And so make sure that we appreciate those values that are associated with are associated with who we want to be and who we want to be seen as.
That sounds like a fantastic place for us to wrap up. If this was helpful, please remember to like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm, as you know. And we talk about solution focused strategies every week. So definitely want to subscribe if that's something that you're interested in. And if you're ready to neutralize all the pressure that's running you ragged in this day and age, and build the healthy life you want to live, join our stress management quest, which I mentioned earlier. It's beginning on April 18th, coming up. So there'll be a link in the description. And if you want to learn more about our unique solution-focused approach, book a complimentary session at staminalab.io. That's staminalab.io. Leave any questions or comments below. We'd love to answer those. Thank you, Dr. Teplow.
Thank you.
And thank everyone for listening. Until next time, remember, you are your own lab, you are your own experiment, and you are your own best coach. Be well.